As I promised you, we're going to spend a lot of time in some of the special and very interesting World War I fortresses that was built around Verdun. We're going to explore some of the events and battles that took place underground and under steel domes here in Verdun. But before we go into the fields and look at some of those battlefields and some of the forts and some of the experimental bunkers that was constructed here, built and tested that you have never seen before, there's something we need to do. We need to take a look at how the French soldier lived and fought in his trenches and what he wore. And fortunately, there's a great bunch of reenactors and historians here who decided to help me with showing you. They built a replica of one of the trenches that was here some 100 years before, and they're going to show you, and you can visit them. You can see for yourself how the soldiers fought and lived, the weapons, the barracks, and the very comfortable clothes that they wore.
Because I'm not an expert on World War I French uniforms, but
I don't think anybody's an expert on World War I uniforms. I'm going to touch your Frenchman. And this is just as uncomfortable as World War II German. World War I French is wool, and it's wet, and it's horrible.
Yes. And this is the capot.
Voilà.
Capot.
Capot,
Okay.
ouais. Manteau. Vous voyez, manteau.
Yeah. In-
Pantalon.
So, isn't this, so this is cut as a,
It's pour marcher,
to walk.
pour faciliter la
It's
marche.
cut away to
this is,
at
oh,
the
so
front.
it just buttons.
It's just
up.
buttons at the back.
Sinon,
Yeah.
ça, oui, voilà,
Oh,
ça
okay,
vient.
so it's buttons there.
Yeah,
Hey,
buttons
button,
there
oh,
to
that's
march.
smart.
Ça vient ici.
To march, yeah.
Very clever.
And the puttees to stop insects getting in your trousers, in your boots, etc. There's an art to faire les...
Ah, vous voulez que j'en mette une?
Non, mais c'est
pour les bandes
un
moltières.
art pour les...
Les bandes moltières.
Yeah, les bandes moltières.
Bandes moltières.
And the one memory from World War I always is the gas mask,
Other gas masks.
which is,
Yeah. It's a pad of...
it literally is, isn't it?
pad of wool, isn't it? C'est le
That
laine.
is all the.
Coton.
That is
coton.
Retire-le. Attends.
Coton, laine à l'intérieur.
This is just a pad of wood that went in front of the mouth.
Yeah.
Comme
With
ça.
produits chimiques dedans.
Ouais, il y a une compresse avec un produit contre le chlore.
Voilà.
Yeah, there's a product to take out the chlorine.
Oh, so there is some material
Yeah,
inside.
there's a
because-
chemical inside. It's impregnated with chemicals.
And this
Yeah.
was,
ils
there
peuvent
was
uriner
leather or was.
Des fois,
Toile
ils urinent dedans quand
cirée.
ils n'ont plus le produit, ils urinent dedans.
Toile cirée, ça. Ça, c'est de la toile cirée.
Oh yeah, waxed
Well, the
waxed
wax
cloth. It's
cloth.
not leather. It's waxed cloth.
Toile
And
cirée.
if you run out of the products to put in the pad, then you urinate on it.
Yes.
So,
That much I do know.
Yeah.
That's just amazing that it was this simple. It
Toile de...
Yeah.
literally just looked like a big diaper. But that was just enough to filter the.
But it covers your face.
Yeah.
Et les gaz un peu plus modernes
Voilà.
qui attaquent la peau.
Voilà.
When the gas attacks the skin,
Au
it doesn't have any
début,
effect at all.
Au début, quand il y a eu les premiers gaz à Ypres, en
The first
Belgique,
gas is an Ypres.
les soldats n'avaient rien.
They had nothing.
Il n'y avait rien.
Yeah.
Donc les Allemands, eux, avaient déjà le masque,
Yeah.
gummi masque. Les Allemands.
The
Ils avaient
gummy mask.
Ils avaient le
The
gummi
German
masque déjà.
gummy mask.
Eux, ils avaient déjà ça.
They
They
did have.
prepared the masks before they
au départ.
did the first gas attack.
Et en
They
face,
protected
il n'y
their
avait
own.
rien. Il n'y avait rien, ils avaient
Yeah,
rien.
the French had nothing. The
Et
British.
donc quand il y a les premières attaques de gaz, et les gars sont morts dans d'horribles souffrances, hein, parce que le
They
gaz
died in
moutarde,
terrible suffering.
ils rongeaient tout sauf le plomb. Donc
Yeah,
ils
mustard
rentraient,
gas.
les gars sont morts dans d'horribles souffrances.
Mm-hmm.
Après, pour les protéger, on leur a donné un tampon
They gave them
qui nouait ici.
a pad.
Un tampon, juste un tampon.
Pad.
Literally
Just
just
a
an
pad.
improvised.
Yeah, yeah.
Après, on leur a donné des lunettes en plus.
Then they gave them goggles.
C'est
Yeah.
pareil.
Ils venaient
Parce
d'aviateur.
qu'on s'est aperçu que le gaz, il brûlait les yeux aussi.
Flying
Ça
goggles.
brûlait.
And this
ça
was
brûlait les
was
yeux.
in the field. Here and now, we have to do something.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the Germans were prepared for it because
Yeah.
they knew they were going to use gas.
Yes.
And then the French were not prepared to use
To
gas for a
improvise, yeah.
while.
They had a pad and then they protected the eyes afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the
this
two
was field
stages.
improvisation.
Field, yeah. The Germans had it in 1915 with a cartridge,
filter.
a filter,
Filter, yeah.
a filter cartridge
And then
on
that-
the front.
Okay.
Yes.
Les Allemands avaient ça depuis 1915, le
Yeah,
masque
they're
à
from
cartouche.
1915.
Les Français ont eu le même 1917.
2 years later, the French made the same.
Mais le masque-là
Okay.
a été utilisé jusqu'à la fin de la guerre.
They used that right up to the end of the war. Yeah. But the problem with the later gases was they didn't only affect your breathing, they affected your skin.
Skin, too.
They affected the rifles. They affected the ammunition.
Yeah.
They corroded everything.
Yeah.
Ils ont corrodé tout. Les gaz utilisés à la fin.
Ça rongeait.
C'était,
Sauf le plomb.
Parce
D'ailleurs,
que-
les Allemands, quand ils ont la première attaque au gaz à Ypres en Belgique, c'était pas des obus, c'était des bonbonnes.
Ah yes,
So they-
they had gas bottles and they opened them and they let the wind blow the cloud of gas towards the Allied lines. They
Les
weren't
Allemands-
shells.
Les Allemands avaient mis dans leurs
So
tranchées.
they just
had,
let it flow with the wind.
Yeah.
Well, gas and wind is a problem because sometimes the wind
Sometimes
turns.
it changes
Sometimes the wind turns, yeah.
Là, ouais, le
Ah,
vent
voilà,
il sort d'un
oui,
côté.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what
yes.
happened. Was it Tannenberg where the Germans fired the first time? Before Tannenberg, but in east, in
Yes.
what became Poland, the Germans, the first gas attack.
Yeah.
Then the wind turned,
turned
but it
around.
was cold, so the
Yes.
gas was.
The gas went down onto
Yeah.
the ground. Yeah.
But they should learn something about that.
Yes,
All right,
yes.
so we obviously
Okay.
have the gas mask, and you have the cartridge for the
Cartridge, yes.
For the barrel.
that's what it is.
120 cartouches, 120. 120
So
cartouches.
120 bullets, 120 rounds.
And they go, what do you
1,
got?
2, 3.
Oh, you got a third as well.
Yeah.
3.
All right, so all right, now we got, and of course you have your canteen because you have to have your canteen and your cup.
Yeah.
That doesn't rattle.
Yeah. The bread bag.
The bread bag. And you have a really cool
Bayonet.
Ah,
bayonet.
now the bayonet with the quillon. Now, the quadrilateral blade, that makes a very nasty wound. The Germans did not like it because it makes a hole in you,
It's a
and it's
triangle.
difficult for the wound to close up.
Do you know why I like this? Because I have one,
You have one, yes.
but I didn't know what it was for. I have a drawer full of bayonets.
Right.
Now I recognize it. I have one.
The quillon is one says it's for bayonet fighting, but that's no, you can't fight.
No, you don't fight with
Just,
it.
No, you don't fight. Now, in fact, it's when you put the three rifles together.
The first label.
Yeah.
First label,
Yeah.
ça,
You can. Oops, sorry.
no existe.
You can put three rifles together
Yes.
in a stand.
Really?
When the bayonet
Yeah,
is
of course,
use
of
it,
course,
use
yeah,
it. That's what that's for.
That's what that's for.
Then
Yeah.
when you fix the bayonet, you can put the three together a bit higher up, right?
C'est pour mettre in the camp.
So that was just that was yeah.
Faut
Yeah,
mettre,
to stack
comme ça.
them outside your
1,
tents.
Yes.
2, 3.
ready for
Yes.
action. But the big problem is when you're running through the barbed wire with that, it snags on everything.
Voilà.
And so the later bayonets, which one I have, they cut it off.
Yeah.
Ensuite,
no couillon.
ensuite, pour éviter de sortir la baïonnette à chaque fois pour mettre les fusils en faisceau, donc ils ont sorti la petite pièce là, ça, c'est uniquement pour mettre les fusils en faisceau.
Yeah, to put them in a
And then
bunch
they
of
stack
three.
them there.
Ça sert à rien d'autre.
Stack,
C'est
yeah.
juste pour ça.
Yes, that's
D'accord.
the only reason. Yeah.
And it's seldom you always see rifles prepared for the combat. Here is he prepared for even for the stacking at the camp.
Yes.
That's a very
là-
nice
De
design.
là, ça va, 1m80. 1m82.
And please, can I demonstrate one thing? Now, the length is to shoot a long distance, but there's also another advantage having a long rifle and a long bayonet. When the German Uhlhan charges you down on his horse with his lance, you've got your lance to ward him off.
And you can reach up that far.
Yeah, you can reach that far against a cavalryman.
Yeah, yeah,
Uhlhan, allemand, attaquant. C'est une bonne défense. That's a good defense.
Au début de la guerre, les Allemands, avec leur Moser baïonnette, c'était à peu près la même longueur que les Français.
The German bayonet was as long as the French one to start with. But,
Après, il y a eu d'autres modèles de baïonnettes,
Yeah.
donc après c'était plus court, plus costaud aussi, parce que leurs grandes baïonnettes, les premières, elles étaient fragiles, elles cassaient.
Yes.
Donc après, ils ont sorti la modèle
But this
98 à
one
coupe-chou.
does not break easily because of the four edges. It's a very
I
strong
mean,
bayonet.
it's a beautiful rifle. 1886,
Yep.
beautifully polished.
Yes.
what is this? This is 7.
It's 8 millimeter.
What's the 777, 75? Is that the?
That's the number.
That's the number.
Yeah, the serial number. And you have a cut-off there, so you can load 8 rounds into the tube and cut off the magazine, like on the early.
So it had a stripper clip. Or
No. You load them one by one. That's the problem. So you keep those in reserve until the enemy rushes you, and you load single shot.
And it's
your
not
magazine
heavy. This
No.
is not a heavy rifle.
And the Lebel round is a very efficient round. The recoil is very gentle.
I know, this is a...
Incredibly gentle recoil. It's more of a push when you fire it. C'est une
Yeah.
pousse au lieu d'une frappe. The SMLE britannique, c'est plus petit, alors le poudre est plus violent. The British 303 has a smaller powder capacity, so they load it with a higher charged powder, a stronger powder, and it gives you a kick
Yeah.
to put out the same performance. The Lebel gives you a push.
The Mauser is heavier than that.
Yes. It's a very effective rifle.
That's
Very effective.
4 kilos. 4 kilos. Vous avez
4
4
kilos.
4 kilo, yeah.
Yeah.
4 kilos.
So
But when you fire it, as the rounds are pushed back by the spring, the center of balance changes slightly. That's the problem with all tube.
Ça, c'est le problème des.
yeah, it's a tube loader.
Yeah, tube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not a magazine. Well, still.
C'était le problème du fusil qu'il y avait avant celui-ci, le fusil gras.
Or the Gras, yeah.
Ouais, le fusil gras. Lui, il avait la baïonnette comme ça.
Yeah, the
Sur
Gras
le côté.
bayonet clicked on the side.
Voilà, sur le côté ici. Là.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Donc ça avait tendance à.
Ooh, and can I show you one other feature of the bayonet? Sorry, be careful with this monster. Now, the sight flips over. Because when the officer gives the command to fix bayonets, if the enemy is at, say, 350 meters,
Yeah.
350 yards away, then you get out your bayonet, ready for the close contact. And that will throw your aim off.
Yes.
So you flip the sight over and it corrects it automatically. When your bayonet is
Close
fitted.
range, yeah.
Yeah, it's very smart. They
Very,
thought
very
it all
smart.
out.
Yes,
On pouvait faire des bons tirs à 700 mètres avec ça.
700 meters, yes.
700.
I fired
Un bon tireur faisait un bon tir avec à 700 mètres. Dans les conditions idéales. Hein.
700 meters. J'ai tiré le mien à 900 mètres à Bisley.
Ah oui,
Yes.
I will say I'm
meters.
kind of I kind of like to fire one. I think I do.
Well, next time you come round, you can fire mine in my shooting gallery.
Will do.
I'm shooting gallery.
All right, so you have a very ornate helmet.
The casque Adrian, the Adrian helmet.
Infanterie.
Lieutenant Adrian designed it.
Okay.
And it is extremely efficient because people did tests recently with more modern helmets. This is as good as the American modern helmet at resisting projectiles, much better than the British and the First World War American helmet.
Distribution à grande échelle à partir de juillet 1915.
July 1915 they started to issue the Adrian helmet, and it is very because of the crest. The crest strengthens it.
Yeah.
The external crest. You think it's merely for decoration, but it's not.
But you still don't want to take shots straight on. This is shrapnel.
For shrapnel.
Shrapnel, yeah.
And it's as good as the American ballistic helmet.
Avant ça,
American Army.
avant ça, le casque, avant, il y avait la calotte.
The kepi, yeah.
C'était une calotte,
Oh, a calotte, yeah.
comme une louche à l'envers, vous savez. Une
cervelière.
Voilà, une cervelière, voilà. Il y avait juste ça, il n'y avait rien d'autre, c'est juste une cervelière qui protégeait la tête, qui était censée protéger la tête.
Oh,
Mais ça ne protégeait rien du tout.
Yeah, they tried to protect the head with
Ça ne protégeait pas grand-chose.
there was an earlier prototype which didn't work very well. So this is the standard grenade, the flaming grenade of the infantry.
And so this would change depending on what unit.
Yes, and that's the early grenade, which would be a cast iron ball filled with black powder.
Grenadier.
With the fuse, the grenadier, right, with RF, République Française on it. Now, artillery would have 2 cross cannons. The engineers, the génie, would have the symbols of the
Cuirasse, une cuirasse.
yes, it's
Cuirasse
like
casque.
trophies, armored
So
trophies.
literally, if you changed unit, you would have to go home and re-weld your helmet.
It's held on by little
Little screw, I
yeah,
bet.
little clips at the back. The colonial troops have an anchor
Okay.
L'artillerie, c'est 2 canons.
Yes, the
Chasseur,
chasseur.
corps de chasse. un
They
corps
have
de
a horn, the light infantry, the chasseur. The North African troops have a crescent. The Muslim troops have a crescent.
Yes, yes, yes.
What
de
else?
marine, troupe de marine,
Yeah, the
grenade,
the grenade
avec
and
une
an
encre.
anchor on it.
Yeah.
And the doctor. The doctor has the caducée,
Caducée, ouais.
Yeah.
the
The
branch
yeah.
with the
Snake,
stick with
yeah.
the snake.
And
Okay.
so this is, so you have a helmet that's literally three pieces. You have the crest, you
Yeah.
have these
Yes.
two separate pieces,
Yes.
and they're bolted. So you have a lot of different pieces that are bolted
There's a
on.
lot of work,
And this is
Yeah,
solid.
but that strengthens it.
Yeah.
It's better than the British and the American one, the Brodie helmet.
And it
Of
still
First World
shields
War.
the neck like the Germans
yes, it
did. In a
does.
different way.
Yeah. The idea is to protect you against shrapnel, which
Yeah.
is why the British one comes wider at the side for
Yeah.
the balls falling down on your shoulders.
And then you have for unit number, unit, or division?
Unité, ouais.
Yes, the
Regiment.
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 Regimental
Regiment.
number. The
Stripes, we know.
stripes, those are, the first stripe means 1 year of service. After that, there's 6 months and 6 months.
So he's not.
that's-
So this is not. He's not a sergeant.
The first,
No.
1 year. The first, 1
First
year.
one,
After 6
is-
months.
And then every 6 months you get another stripe. These are for 2 wounds he's received.
Okay.
Okay. The Germans had a similar system, I think, the wound system. And
Yeah.
then he's a corporal.
So that's
Couple.
that's the rank.
Yeah,
Okay. And this is the years. Is this rank as well? A year of service.
that's right.
That's
that's
right.
right as well.
1914. 1914. Le grade de
14.
caporal, c'était
Yes.
une bande rouge.
Oh yeah, 1914 there was a red
Comme ça.
band for the
Oh,
corporal.
corporal.
Made you a good target, so
Tout, comme
you
ça.
don't want that.
Voilà.
Yeah.
And the officers, even in the 19th, pendant les années 30, 40, they had the gold bands, les bandes
Voilà.
dorées on the sleeve.
Deux
And
bandes, des fois trois bandes dorées, ça dépend.
And that's
Yes.
for being grenadier, like.
Grenadier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
infantry.
Grenadier, c'est spécialiste.
A
Spécialité.
specialist.
Special-
Because you would
Yeah.
have the tremblant, which goes on and the VB grenade,
Ou alors,
which the
grenadier,
bullet fires up the middle.
I don't know if you're working out or what I did wrong, but my backpack always falls off. To hold your backpack, hold your rifle stripe here. I want this back. I put my backpack on, everything slides up. This is perfect.
Il en veut, parce que too
This is
tall.
absolutely perfect.
Brilliant, isn't it?
All right, so behind you,
Right, what have we got?
what do we got? So we got the backpack, we got the food canteen.
Boutéon,
What is in the backpack? Is it a tent?
pas de tente.
There's a tent in there.
There's 10 in there.
So what is in the bag here?
What is
in there?
What is in the actual pack? It's a hard square pack.
Canteen for 4 soldiers.
Oh, this is to feed 4 soldiers.
That's to feed 4 soldiers.
Individuel,
That's his own.
une demi-toile de tente,
Half a tent.
Half a tent.
une demi.
So you get 2 soldiers
Oh, yeah.
together, and then
Yes.
that's familiar. And and this is all his private kit.
Ah, that's your toothbrush, etc. Okay, and the piece of wood with a hole with a slot, the morceau de bois.
Sardine.
Sardine.
They call it the sardine. And when you show students that, they have no idea what it is for. And it's for when you're going to go on parade, you clean your uniform and you polish your buttons. So you have a piece of wood that slides
oui.
round it
Patience.
to protect
Une patience.
a passion.
Oh,
right?
so you can polish your button
without
dirtying
dirtying your uniform. It's
That's-
this little strip of wood with a hole and a slot.
Patience.
And no, that's disappeared because we have
Plastic uniform.
Plastic,
Plastic
yeah,
buttons, yeah,
yeah.
plastic everything.
Yeah.
And what you really want to do when you're at the front is you want to have shiny buttons so they can really have something to aim for.
Yeah, for the parade only.
For the parade
then you
only,
go
yeah.
back to the Madon.
This was the 1914 uniform, standard uniform.
1950.
1915. So that's the 1914.
Ceux-là, c'est pareil que, sauf que lui, c'est la capote. Moi, c'est juste la veste que j'ai. Et la
You have a
Verdun,
vest underneath.
ça.
Ah, right. Yeah, this is the under jacket.
So that is underneath
under-
this,
under-
Ah, yes,
Yes.
yes.
but
plus
It's
léger.
a little thinner, but it seems just as
C'est plus léger,
uncomfortable.
c'est plus moins-
Everyone has the vest, and then the capote goes over, the overcoat.
Wow. Okay, but his pants are also
Même
different
pantalon,
color.
ouais.
There's a different
C'est pour
color.
ça, le bleu foncé.
There was some, the darker blue. They didn't have enough fabric to equip the whole army, the million men. They bought cloth from the British. So there are variations in the color.
This is just a matter of not having enough. Because all of a sudden, this was a war that wasn't supposed to last this long.
Right.
There was not enough equipment of any to begin with. So you started buying from the British,
Yeah.
and there was a dye that was used in uniforms that was bought by the Germans before the war.
The red
that was
dye,
no longer
the
available.
Germans didn't give them the red dye. So this should have been more of a, if you add that in, it's more, well, you add red to that. Red, white and blue.
And then that would have closer to
It
that
would
color.
be darker, yeah, it would be darker. It would be more brownish perhaps, okay?
And you're obviously a medic or a doctor.
Docteur,
Docteur.
infirmier.
Infirmary.
A
Infirmerie.
nurse, a nurse, yeah.
And the 44th was
C'est le 111e territorial. C'est les vieux.
White, white,
Oh, yeah, the old
white
veterans.
number. White number.
white number.
What number for the old
44 territorial, c'est les vieux.
veterans? The reservists.
Non combattants, je suis trop vieux pour aller pour
They
me
wouldn't be
battre.
in the front line, but they
So
would be
and the
support.
doctor at the infirmary, okay.
Voilà.
So what would you have in there if not
Donc
bullets?
là, j'ai les pansements dedans.
Pansement.
Pansements.
Bandages.
Bon. Bandage.
Bandages and procedure, yeah.
Yeah.
And otherwise your uniform is
Mais là,
the
je
same.
suis à l'arrière, c'est pour ça que je suis habillé.
Yeah, yeah.
J'ai pas de casque parce que moi, je suis à l'arrière.
He doesn't have a helmet because he works in the rear area. And that is the bonnet de police.
Voilà.
A police bonnet, they call it.
Oh,
Because
they
the
call
policemen
it.
today, the policemen today still have the same bonnet.
So theoretically it is just a coincidence that the colors are different.
Yeah, yeah.
It is just
It's not deliberate. No.
it was just
The
a,
first model, bleu très très clair.
Very light blue, the very first
light.
ones.
yes.
Yeah,
The first model.
yeah.
Après pendant la guerre,
Yeah,
après,
during the
manquant
war.
de tissus, après ils ont pris tous les tissus qu'il y avait
Yeah, yeah.
dans le genre-là. C'est pour ça que vous avez plusieurs teints.
There are different colorings. Yeah, different.
Des fois vous aviez une capote de cette couleur-là et un
pantalon.
pantalon plus foncé.
And darker trousers to start with.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah, and well, as the material was available, really.
It was just an evolution because of necessity, not because of design.
No.
Did that ever cause misunderstandings in the trench by units who would misidentify?
Blue on blue, you mean?
Yeah.
It would be blue on blue, wouldn't it?
Mais-
But there were never any. Il n'y avait jamais des problèmes d'identité parce que les uniformes étaient un peu différents.
Ouais, non.
Non,
Mais-
parce que le bleu horizon c'était français
Voilà,
de quelque temps.
normalement.
It was
Après il y avait des nations qui ont pris l'uniforme
yeah,
français.
and the
D'autres nations qui ont pris l'uniforme français.
other countries took up the French uniform,
Okay.
including the Cascadrian.
And the Allies and French uniforms were close and identifiable enough that they wouldn't be mistaken for the German.
And the Alpine troops had a dark blue.
Dark bleu.
Dark blue.
Bleu foncé.
The chasseurs
Et
alpins.
béret
Better,
et
yeah.
après casque.
It was a taft which would lie down on the shoulder, a
Yes.
huge beret.
Je peux vous
From
dire le nom.
the beginning, the rouge et le bleu,
Voilà.
le bleu foncé. Yeah, the KP and the
Capote ou
yeah, the capote
manteau, ouais.
were the priorities. So they had light blue KPs instead of red ones, much better.
Yes.
And the blue jackets. So the trousers encore rouge.
1915.
1915,
En
they
1915,
still had red trousers.
le soldat français, il est habillé de briques et de broc.
Yeah, it was
Il n'y avait
anything.
pas assez
Yes.
il y avait pas assez
Mixed-
d'uniformes.
mixed up,
Donc,
yeah.
vous aviez des manteaux bleu clair avec
Light blue,
des pantalons rouges,
red
des
trousers,
pantalons bleu foncé,
dark
des
blue
pantalons
trousers,
en velours aussi,
velvet trousers,
et des tenues,
yeah.
des tenues complètes en velours parce qu'ils n'avaient pas assez de
and
tissu
velvet. Yeah, they didn't have enough wool.
complète.
And also,
Mais uniquement en veste et pantalon, hein, pas de manteau. Mais
Ah, no,
les tenues
the
tout en
jacket
velours,
and
c'était
the
beaucoup les
trousers
vestes, beaucoup les vestes et les pantalons.
in velvet, velour. Yeah,
yeah. But red trousers
Ça,
too,
c'est-
but just
red
yeah.
trousers until they had
1915.
enough material.
1915, Paul de 1915, sur toute l'année, Olière, c'était 1915, c'était tenue disparate.
Yeah, all through 1915 it was whatever they could get.
Yeah.
mixed parts.
Yeah,
Voilà,
but
voilà.
because in the beginning, in 1914, in the beginning of the war, everybody went to war with the mindset of the wars before.
Yes.
Like
I
the
know.
Belgians
Yes, the
marched
Belgians
into
were there,
war
yeah.
with the band in their red,
Yes,
and
yes, they did.
and it took time for the older commanders to
Yeah.
realize that we needed new material.
No, but the French army experimented with camouflage, with khaki uniforms before the war. But the problem is that someone said it was too similar to the German
Yes.
Feldgrau,
Yeah.
and there would be confusion. So they abandoned that, and then they were still left with the blue and the red until they came up with the
And
blue-
that
the
became the
horizon.
standard uniform for
Yeah.
the rest of the war.
Yes, because then you would have had blue on blue situations.
Yeah,
if
well,
they
yeah.
were all looking like Germans.
I feel, yeah,
Ça,
exactly.
c'est l'uniforme jusqu'à la fin de la guerre.
The grenadiers. Here they decided to recreate the Trench of Toulouse. All the trenches had names to be identified easily, not just numbers, which came from the village square right up to.
Elle montait sur les premières lignes.
It went right up to the first line.
Pourquoi?
Why?
Parce qu'ici, en Meuse, on ne trouve pas de tranchées reconstituées. On va dans les bois, il y a des semblants de tranchées parce que la nature a repris ses droits. Donc David a eu l'idée de reconstituer une tranchée. Parce que les gens, quand ils viennent sur Verdun, ils veulent tous voir des tranchées. Sauf que il n'y en a plus.
Yes. So there are lots of trench remains in the woods, but they're simply they're hollowed out. So when people come to Verdun, they want to see trenches, and there aren't any. So they decided to recreate a trench as it was originally.
Trench.
So that was the trench.
From the village.
Chatancourt.
So this is
The
Chatancourt.
same thing taken from
same thing.
Chatancourt aussi.
So you have
Lower
two lines of trenches.
Deux lignes de tranchées.
Non, c'est les rues.
Les rues,
those
puis il y a
are
les maisons détruites.
This is
The
streets.
destroyed village.
Streets.
It's hard to see because it all looks like cheese.
Là ici vous avez
Là, déjà. Gaz.
Gas warning.
alerte au gaz, alerte au gaz.
That's important.
Shrapnel.
This is actual.
Shrapnel. Shrapnel.
And this is the kind of stuff that would be flying at 800-900 meters a second
Voilà, c'est une caisse, peut-être une caisse.
through.
Now, the gun we saw yesterday is a 155, and that fired shrapnel shells as well. But
fire-
just a
yeah.
75.
So not only would would the balls separate in every direction, this would separate in pieces and fly at you.
Yeah, well, the base would fly.
No, the base, yeah.
Ah, tu veux quoi?
Tu nous prends photo?
And here's part of. This is part of a 75 centimeter shell.
Plus rien.
75.
Yeah,
that's a 75.
Non,
This
c'est
75.
pas de-
Imagine this flying at you at what 800 meters a second.
Yeah. Well,
Encore.
the thing is that shrapnel was very effective against troops in the open. But then they found that an explosive shell was just as effective when it smashed into pieces and came flying through the air at you.
And there's.
Alors normalement une tranchée c'est 2 mètres de profondeur minimum.
2 meters deep minimum. Yes, after the Battle of the Marne, the War of Movement ended, and the trenches were dug a minimum of 2 meters deep, lined with anything that they had to have.
Si vous aviez de l'eau directement à 2 mètres, vous creusez 1,50 m et le restant était rehaussé.
Oh, right.
Voilà.
And if there was a water level below you and you couldn't go down 2 meters, you dug 1.5 meters and you raised the sides of the
You
trench.
filled it up. So you had to have 2 meters over you for shells.
Yeah.
Which makes that pretty much the most important piece of equipment.
But also a ferocious weapon. More people were killed with shovels than ever with bayonets.
Yes.
Plus de gens ont été tués par des pelles que jamais avec des
Mais
bayonettes.
ils
hein.
aiguisaient des fois.
Ça, c'est comme ça.
Yeah,
Tonk.
yeah. They-
Oh yes. I mean, still
Là,
today.
là c'était aiguisé.
C'est
effilé.
aiguisé.
Yeah, they'd sharpen it.
Parce qu'avec le fusil, la baïonnette, C'est trop grand dans une tranchée.
It's too long, it's too
Ah.
cumbersome inside a trench.
Oh yeah, that'll do.
can't-
Donc on se bat soit avec des couteaux, et les Allemands, bah, ils prennent la pelle.
You still have combat shovels today. I learned how to throw sharpened shovels by the Russians. We did training or drinking together.
Il est entraîné avec des Russes.
Alors normalement dans les tranchées il y avait des cailleboutiers, mais la tranchée, je parle de la tranchée neuve, de la tranchée de départ. Hein. La tranchée au départ.
When the trenches were new, there's like a framework of timber.
The whole wood siding, wood floor, that was to begin with when you had the time and the material.
When the trench was new.
Later in the war, it was whatever. It was mud, it was the sides, it was sandbags. It wasn't as elaborate if it, or was it?
C'était pas si élaboré quand la guerre a progressé. Les tranchées étaient plus
bah, les tranchées.
You rebuilt it as you could, as
Yeah,
best you could.
and that's where the mud came from.
Yeah, if they had the timber to repair it, then okay, but otherwise it would just remain mud.
Yeah, and I guess these guys were lucky.
Plastic surgery was invented, and they had masks to cover
Yeah.
part of their faces. To not scare away the young girls.
Yeah.
C'était marié aussi, il y avait des gars qui étaient mariés. Donc,
Oh, yeah, and they came back for these also. Toujours comme ça. I'm not sure. Yeah.
This is very well done.
It is, isn't it?
It is.
It's American.
Oh, American wearing British helmets, that's right.
Yeah, the Brody helmet.
Les Américains, ils arrivent à Châtroncourt ici en septembre 18.
September 1918 they came here to Chatancourt. Yeah.
2 years too late.
Ooh.
c'est le fil téléphonique.
Telephone wire.
Téléphonique.
Okay.
Alors pour la petite histoire, hein, ce sont des isolateurs d'époque,
Yeah.
mais allemands.
The German insulating blocks,
C'est juste pour la...
but from the period. Trenches were so complicated and long that in some cases the Germans held one part of the trench and the French held another part. And there was a no man's land in the middle of the same trench.
Of the same trench.
Yeah. Newcomers to the trench, you take the Trench of Toulouse, and then at one point you turn right, because if you turn left, that's the German part. Some of the trenches were only 10 meters apart, 10 yards apart.
10 mètres. Donc c'était
Which
pas,
is
c'était pas
incredible.
tout le temps
The French and
50
German.
mètres ou 100 mètres, hein. Des fois c'était plus près. Hein.
10 meters.
These are quite wide. Is that because this is a second line trench that it is quite
Est-ce
wide?
que c'est très large parce
Oui,
que
c'est
c'est
large.
deuxième ligne? Les premières lignes étaient plus étroites?
Non, c'était pareil. Hein. C'était pareil
They were
partout.
the
hein.
same.
That was the
French
same.
c'est partout.
French
Ouais, ouais.
trenches.
Il n'y a que les boyaux. Les boyaux, par contre, c'est tout petit.
Ah, yeah, the communication trenches, the
Well, the thin
boyau
ones.
of,
Alors,
yeah.
Yes.
comme disait mon collègue, donc la tranchée c'était 2 mètres. Le boyau, lui, c'était pour relier une tranchée à une autre tranchée.
Yeah, the communication trench were
Yeah.
to join trenches together.
Il aurait fallu monter sur le terrain pour redescendre dans l'autre. Donc ça, c'était
Yeah,
pas faisable parce qu'on se
instead
faisait
of
tirer dessus.
climbing over to get
Yeah.
from one trench to another.
Mais-
Mais le problème avec les boyaux, c'est que
pas profond.
à Verdun,
C'est pas profond. Hein.
no, c'est pas profond. The boyaux were never very deep, but you used one boyau
1m20,
to
1m50.
mount
à peu près.
to the battlefield, to climb up to the battlefield, and another boyau for the survivors to descend back to Verdun. You never wanted the two to meet. So the new troops, the fresh troops come in, didn't want to see the wounded, the gassed, the girl cassée, the guys on stretchers, so they came up by a different boyau.
That was actually a deliberate thought for morale.
Deliberate thought, yeah.
And then, of
Maintain
course,
the
at the
morale.
front line trenches, you would start digging like the old zigzagging
tout le
towards
But
the.
even the boyau is a zigzag,
It's all
le temps,
zigzag.
all zigzag.
Just like old fortress siege warfare
Yeah.
500 years before.
Yes.
Bah, c'était ou en
Yeah.
zigzag ou alors en créneau de château fort, comme ça.
Oh yeah, they did the
Yeah.
C'est pour éviter
Like
les
a
tirs en enfilade.
battlements
Yeah,
instead
battlement,
of the Zs, the Vs.
So the tactics goes all the way back to siege warfare
Yeah.
of the castles
Yeah,
5,
yeah,
6,
yeah.
700 years before.
C'était pour s'approcher des châteaux. Oh yeah, because if a plane comes over, they can fire their machine guns.
Straight down the trench, yeah.
Chapelle.
A chapel.
During the First World War, it was estimated that 2,490 kilometers of trench lines were dug. I don't know why we didn't round that up to 500. Anyway, most of the trenches were between 1 and 2 meters wide and about 3 meters deep. It would take about 450 men 6 hours to build around 250 meters of trench. Now, you can dig trenches in 3 different ways. You can simply dig a trench straight into the ground. That would be known as entrenching. It's fast, but you're open to enemy fire while doing it. Another method was to extend a trench from one end. It's called sapping. It's safer, but it takes longer. And the third, most time-consuming, was tunneling, where you would literally dig a tunnel, and then, when it was done, you would remove the roof. That's safer, but it's a lot more difficult. Also, trenches have to constantly be kept up, and in rain and shelling, that takes a lot of work, and was generally a miserable job. As the war began, the French had well-made cemented trenches running as communications between the large forts. However, as fighting really broke out into the open, they had to improvise and use any materials they could to build these and to maintain them.
Officer's room.
D'époque.
French corrugated iron.
French corrugated.
Ça, c'est de la tôle allemande, ça.
That's the German.
D'époque aussi, hein.
German corrugated.
From the period.
And but it's only be covered just for shrapnel and rain and
Yes, yes, yes.
yeah.
Ah, now this is what you would put in a rivière or a canal.
Tiens, voilà.
This is to
Pas le
To
planche, pas le planche, on appelle
to
ça.
support the sides of a canal.
C'est le même
To
système.
drive in,
Oh,
piling.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh hell
Can you
yeah.
see? It's not just corrugated iron.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very substantial.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you use whatever you have.
Alors ça, des morceaux de bois, là, c'est pour renforcer le...
Non, mais il n'y avait pas le plancher à l'époque, quand on l'a fait.
That's the German. You see a lot of sheds in the Meuse
and
made
you
of that German corrugated iron.
And you're starting to see how the mud would come,
Yeah,
keep
the mud's
being
coming.
filled up by shelling and.
You've got the boots, the Hobnail Boots.
Oh, they had hobnail boots,
Yeah.
of course.
And when you go into a magazine, there are wooden sabot clogs hanging on the door.
So you wouldn't spark.
Yeah, with the black powder and the, well, whatever.
Ah, n'est-ce pas? C'est un repos, le bel, ou c'est un... Ton avis?
On dirait une repos.
Ah, ils sont...
Yes, it's
Ah ouais?
it's a repro.
They would be the bunker ovens would be coal fired, right?
No, on utilise le bois dans
De
le
bois,
four.
ouais, ouais.
Wood.
Wood.
Wood fired.
Alors si vous préférez, ça fait un peu genre caillebotis, voilà.
Oh, that's the
Exactly.
calibuti, right? It's a framework look going in two directions.
C'est un peu caillebotis.
Wood underneath and wood on the top.
Is that for drainage?
Alors ça,
Well, yeah, because if they didn't have enough planks. That's
Donc
what
là,
they
on voit
used.
bien le pantalon en velours.
vous voyez, pantalon
Ah,
bleu,
yeah, the velvet trousers. When they didn't have enough
So they
woolen material.
Actually,
Alors, il y avait aussi bien en surface qu'en profondeur, hein.
En première ligne, c'est en
Comme
profondeur.
là, c'est peut-être celui-là, ce
Oh,
qu'on voit là.
the two levels. They don't
Profondeur.
even go. There's the second line.
Ca-
But in the front line, you don't trench. You only have the lower level.
4, 8, 12 soldats, hein, à peu près. Hein.
4, 8, 12 soldiers.
Donc le
like
sommier,
that.
il est en grillage,
Yeah.
hein, ou alors vous aviez des planches. Dessus, ils mettaient leur paillasse, le sac avec la paille dedans,
Right.
et ils se couchaient dessus.
So they had planks, the wire netting holding everything together, and then a sack filled with straw. The fleas and the rats, your friends, your animal accompaniment, your pets.
Et les rats, eux, ils tournaient autour, s'ils pouvaient grignoter dans la musette, là-dedans, pour à
trying to get in
manger.
the bread bag,
Hein?
the
Yeah.
rats.
Ou des fois, même, ils grimpaient dans les pantalons. Hein.
They climbed up your trousers.
Ils pouvaient grimper dans le pantalon.
Yeah.
so is it true they would hang the musette bag so the rats couldn't get to them?
But the rats can climb in.
They climb ropes anyway, so it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
yeah.
Et dessus, des fois, certains faisaient une petite cage
Then sometimes you made a little cage
en
or
grillage
netting
pour pouvoir dormir
to be able to
tranquille.
sleep. To protect your face, protéger le visage.
Il y avait des
Pour la
malins.
caméra,
Donc c'était, il faisait tout complet, hein, comme ça, voilà,
Yeah.
avec du grillage dessus, puis ils dormaient dessous. Comme ça, ils étaient tranquilles. Comme s'ils avaient une moustiquaire, mais pour les rats. Avec du grillage comme ça.
So the rats would literally start nibbling at you when you were sleeping.
C'est protection.
Yeah. And you didn't like that to wake up with a rat.
Pareil, c'est toujours, toujours de la tôle française, toujours de tôle d'époque. Ça.
Oh yes, it's
Voilà.
it's an arc, isn't it? The 90
Tôle
degree arc
française,
the
hein.
Germans used. Ça c'est allemand.
Français.
Oh, ça c'est
Français, français aussi.
Ah, pardon.
Les Allemands, vous avez vu,
Ah, mais
ils sont.
continue,
Ouais. Les Allemands, elles sont plus,
180
elles sont mieux
degrés.
conservées. Elles ont été galvanisées.
Ah, the German ones were galvanized.
Was this mine
Pétard raquette française.
maquette?
Raquette.
Oh, tripwire for
C'est artisanal ça.
Sinel. Okay, so, yeah.
Artisanal. Dutch.
Dutch.
German,
Français.
French.
Dutch.
Okay.
Une Kugel, ça veut dire boule
Ouais.
en allemand.
Ouais.
Fougue, c'est français.
Ouais.
Français et français. Grenade à fusil.
The VB.
Yeah.
The VB. And there's a hole up the middle. You fire a real a live cartridge through the grenade in the grenade holder. It
Celle-là,
passes up and it strikes. It strikes the percussion, which sets the fuse burning, and the gas following behind blows it in the air and in the direction of the German
They
machine
actually
gun nest.
fired a live bullet into the grenade.
Through the grenade, and the advantage is the live bullet goes towards the enemy as well. But that is so effective against German machine gun nests.
50 mètres encore.
50 meters.
50 meters.
Ça tire pas non plus.
Well, that's enough.
C'est pas mal, hein.
Ah oui.
C'est first line.
This is the first line. I noticed they got a little smaller.
Hey, yeah.
Observé.
The German one has a little a hinged cover.
Dans la vraie situation, les Allemands ils étaient à mi-pente entre le bois et puis ici. Vous voyez?
The Germans will be halfway to the woods. Right.
And a little bit of armored plate that would do a little bit.
Well, yeah, the German armor-piercing bullet would go through that at that distance.
Yeah.
This is, well, if they knew you were here.
Oh, the trench periscope, yeah, yeah.
In wood, yeah.
See if we can see anything through the trench periscope.
C'est réplique ou original?
Can. It's a little dirty, but
Oh yeah, this would be a listening post. They would listen out for the Germans preparing an attack, and also they would listen to any underground noises in case they're digging.
when did they
mines.
start with the tunneling under?
Les tunnels, ils ont commencé quoi,
Ils faisaient les tunnels.
très tôt, hein, je pense. Hein.
Alors dans le coin ici, les tunnels c'était Vauquois.
Pourquoi? Yeah,
Les épaves.
Les épaves. Yeah, we saw nous avons vu les épaves. Yeah.
Ouais.
Il n'y avait pas de tunnel, de mine ici.
Non. Ah, si, il y a eu des mines, ici.
Ah, des petits
Et c'est pour dire aussi qu'il y a eu, il y avait des soldats qui étaient là pour écouter ce qui se passait.
Yep. It's an écoute.
Ils écoutaient le sol, ils écoutaient aussi ce qui se passait chez l'ennemi, si des fois ils n'étaient pas loin.
Yeah.
Et si des fois il y avait une attaque au gaz, c'est eux qui... Vous voyez la cloche à côté là?
Yep, they got the
Voilà.
bell,
Donc ils sonnaient la cloche pour alerter les types qui avaient le...
As soon as they realized the trenches were difficult to capture. That's the
Je crois.
problem.
So they literally started tunneling under each other.
Yeah, quite early on. Because it was a less costly
Ah, si, c'est
way
bien, c'est
than
bon.
launching
Là il y a une belle vue.
the frontal attack.
Voilà, pour situer un peu le terrain.
Yeah.
But I mean, there must have been a time before they brought in miners to do the tunneling. And initially, this was supposed to be a war that would be over in 6 weeks. And they didn't start digging trenches in the beginning.
No.
It took a little while of fighting before they realized they would get stuck here, right?
Yes. And then when they tried frontal assaults and they were suicidal and didn't work that well, then they started mining. But of course the ground had to be of the right type to mine.
Yeah. And the tunnels would have to be very deep under the mud and the wet and...
Well, you couldn't dig a tunnel where there was a water table, that's the problem.
Alors, des fois, quand ils creusaient un tunnel, si les soldats français, par exemple, ils entendaient le tunnel se creuser en dessous, des fois, ils creusaient un contre-tunnel au-dessus.
Yeah.
Et dès qu'ils arrivaient, ils sentaient qu'ils arrivaient au-dessus des gars, ils perçaient un trou pour arriver dans le tunnel du dessous et ils balançaient des grenades.
Those are French
L'époque.
armor plates. Yeah.
Donc, on faisait le coup de feu à travers. Voilà.
Just enough space.
Et voilà.
Just enough space. That is just enough. And that would at least protect you from rifle fire.
La plaque de là.
Ah, wait, one of the shields is stamped with the 1917 date. Ah, it's a
Well, French is
yeah. This was
the German.
bullet strikes on it.
Il y avait un volet là.
That round.
Mais
Ils ont un volet, ouais.
Yeah.
les Allemands, ils ont un petit volet, tac, qui ferme. Parce qu'en face, vous avez les snipers.
Oui.
God sniper, là, piou, hop. Et le soldat qui est derrière.
And this one has taken some impacts. It's back to front. But that's
Well, if it wasn't back to front, we couldn't see it.
Exactly.
So I get the one time when you said that's, and this is just rifle fire, or
rifle fire.
yeah.
But after the first tank attacks,
Après, c'est la rouille, hein.
the
Après,
Germans
c'est-
introduced armor-piercing ammunition.
Yeah, the anti-tank rifles would shoot through this,
Yeah, it shoots.
and
through.
more.
Yeah. I knew the pig's tails, but I didn't know that they had that as well.
Yeah, the spiral.
First modèle,
Yeah.
alors, le premier modèle, c'était du bois.
The British sent their guys out to repair the holes in the barbed wire at night with plain, not the spirals, with a mallet to make a noise, to bang them in the ground.
Et donc il fallait taper.
Yeah.
Et les Allemands en
Well,
face,
because they
ils entendaient le bruit, donc fusée éclairante et tiraient sur tout ce qui est...
And you put your bayonet through that, you screw it into the ground.
Après, ils ont fait le modèle là.
Well, that was the second model. after
Second
the
modèle,
war.
voilà, ça.
Yeah.
Donc il y avait juste à visser dans le sol.
So you
besoin de
still
taper.
stick your bayonet
Voilà.
through and turn.
Yeah, you could with your bayonet, yeah.
Et après, ils ont fait le... Voilà.
The queue de cochon,
Après, ils ont fait la queue de cochon, comme ça.
the pig's tail.
Là, c'est juste pour un fil. Après, vous aviez des fois 2, 3,
Oui, sometimes there
anneaux.
were multiple rings.
plusieurs fils,
Ah,
c'était
yeah.
plusieurs anneaux. Donc on mettait un morceau de bois dedans, et puis on le vissait dans le sol.
Yeah.
Donc les soldats appellent
Plus
ça
besoin
un
de taper.
séchoir.
Hotchkiss mitrailleur.
Model 1914. So you've got a four-man team. You've got the chief with his binoculars searching out the target. You have the gunner. You have the guy who loads the strip, and the supply.
The
man.
guy that gets the munition.
There's a wooden box with the strips in.
Yeah.
To protect them, and he's handing them out of the box.
Yeah.
To the guy who actually clips them together, one on one up. They could get down to just two men. Yeah. But you do need the charger. You need the guy to clip each strip
Yeah.
together.
Please, sister, just one picture with you.
C'est tout ce qu'on retrouve sur le terrain.
Yeah.
Trouvaille. And then there's an American.
Américain, Dutch, French, français, et l'allemand.
Allemagne.
Allemagne.
That's the old German helmet with bolts.
And that's Model 17, American, with the rifle.
The rifle.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, with the protected rear sight, like the.
Yeah. Is this Is this a boot?
Yes.
Yes, it is. It's the. Wow, I'm surprised this is still
Ouais, c'est
alive.
lourd.
I'm surprised this is still intact. Because part of this is leather and metal. Oh, this is where you. Oh, and this I know what this is.
Cold trap.
Yes.
Top, ouais.
With throw that down between the barbed wire. So when you throw yourself down to avoid a shell, you land on that.
Bayonet.
Bayonet Dutch.
Yeah. And more black leather and boots. It's amazing what actually survives.
Américain, ça c'est de la viande qui est dedans du rue.
It's a tin for meat. Corned beef, probably.
Of course.
Dutch.
Et ça, c'est le.
German water bottle.
German water bottle.
Et française. Hop. Et la
Which
française.
is like an animal skin, comme le peau d'animal.
Voilà.
À l'origine, it's like an animal.
C'est une fusée d'obus à shrapnel, ça. La fusée d'obus à
that's the
shrapnel.
cap from a shrapnel.
Ici, graduation, hein,
Yeah.
c'est
So this is the fuse.
voilà,
Yes,
ça,
the fuse.
c'est en fonction, c'est des fusants, voilà.
You pierce it at the distance you want,
Yeah.
and the flame from firing it sets the gunpowder train burning. So if you want a long distance, you punch.
C'est en
up the
fonction du
guns,
temps ou de la
slow it
distance qu'il y avait.
down, and close range is the last one.
C'était un réglage.
And then it fires
Explosion.
into a tube which sets off the main
Yeah.
charge.
Is this an early year fuse or?
No, those they're all the same. They're still using them
French,
in
huh?
the
French,
Second
huh?
World War.
La shrapnel aussi. Vous voyez, shrapnel dans les obus.
I like fuses.
And they are the size of musket balls. They're musket balls,
They are, yeah.
which they used originally. And
Alors,
just kept going.
un obus à shrapnel n'était jamais très épais. Parce que quand il devait exploser, il fallait pas que l'enveloppe elle retienne tout.
Yeah.
Donc il fallait que ça explose assez facilement.
So
Donc c'était jamais très épais par rapport à un obus explosif. Un obus explosif c'était très très épais.
explosive.
Lui, c'est lui qui partait en morceaux qui tuait. Par contre, pour les billes, il fallait que l'explosion elle se fasse bien comme il faut et puis que les billes elles fassent leur effet.
Yes.
Donc il fallait pas trop les resserrer.
C'est
C'est pour ça que c'était, vous voyez, c'est pas très épais, hein, l'épaisseur.
Yeah, this is just
Je sais pas si c'est un
just
morceau-
like
That would be
pas un
about
morceau
a,
de-
it would be a
d'explosif, là.
19mm musket ball. Can you see? Yeah. From the muzzle
pas si-
loaders.
Ça c'est shrapnel aussi. Hein. C'est pas très épais, hein, shrapnel ça. Mais un obus explosif, il est plus épais, l'épaisseur, c'est plus épais.
and yeah, you see the
Ça, c'est
line of the shell here.
Alors ça, voilà, ça c'est la bague.
Yeah.
La bague.
Yeah, the
Bague
make it
Cupper,
spin, yeah.
Cupper, hein, c'est Cupper.
copper.
Ah, Cupper. Allemand, hein. Ça c'est allemand.
Yeah.
On reconnaît les Allemands parce qu'ils avaient 3 stries en dessous.
All the three stripes. That's a German shrapnel shell.
Et donc la bague.
Out of the 77.
And grenade.
Voilà d'amont.
German
Yeah.
grenade.
Oh, this what's left of
Ah, oui, c'est rien, c'est-
Grenade.
what's left of a stick grenade. I mean, considering this is 100 and some years old, it's actually not in bad shape.
Ah, c'est US-17.
Yeah, the model 19.
US-17.
Yeah. But this is all found around here.
Yes.
Ah, beer drink.
Really?
Beer. Dutch.
Of course they brought back.
German. Hein? Two utility. Beer,
Schnaps.
schnapps.
Ah, yes.
This is
Spider.
Je regarde.
little-
Spider
little
home.
cap.
A thimble.
Elle dit à coudre. Hop.
Yes.
And the label cases you have there, such in value.
Lebel. Lebel.
It's a label bullet cartridge.
That's good.
Balde.
Dutch.
Dutch. This is German. No,
No,
that,
that's
yeah,
this is German.
Bullet
this
cuivre.
is short and fat.
And that is because that's the rimless German one.
Donc les balles françaises ne rouillent pas, c'est du cuivre.
This red copper,
Voilà.
Cuivre Rouge, red copper.
I'm guessing the label was more powerful than the Mauser, having room for more powder.
About the equivalent, I think.
Il peut les garder s'il veut. Hein. Cadeau.
German,
You can keep based on the 11mm Gras. And to make the 8mm lebel, they just they squeeze the case to make it triangular.
That's what they did.
And the early ball was round, but this is the Baldi. It's of red copper, 8mm, and it's boat tail inside. You can't see that. It's very, very good projectile, ballistically.
Fusil Gras, lui, c'était 11 mm.
And there's another advantage to it being a triangular. When it's in the tube of the lebel, under the barrel, each one sits with the point downwards. So they don't, the point doesn't go in the back of the...
yeah, that would be a thing in a tube magazine.
Yeah, because you'd have to have a rounded head otherwise, or a flat head, like in the Winchester. But they can do that, and there's normally... This one hasn't got it. There's normally a ring to protect from the nose going in the percussion cap. This one hasn't got it for some reason.
Well, I mean, it's been sitting in the ground for 100 years. That makes sense.
No, there's a ring cut out. It was...
Oh, okay.
US bayonet,
US.
Springfield.
Model 1913.
Springfield 1900.
Oh, yes.
It's the British.
I recognize that.
Yep. It's for the P14, which was taken over by America as the Model 1917. So the bayonet was...
Alors, il y avait ça aussi, voilà.
But it's perfectly straight still after all these years.
Yeah, well, originally it was stop cavalry charges, but then if you sew those between the barbed wire, when you throw yourself flat, when you're a shell, you land on one
Ça,
of those.
c'est par terre, c'est avec les pointes en l'air.
Whichever way it falls, there's always
Because that's been in effect for 700-800 years before World War I against the horse charges.
C'est aussi bien pour les pieds que pour les mains. Hein.
Yeah.
It's quite a collection, isn't it?
I can imagine how much people they find here still.
Et des fois, ils mettaient ça aussi pour la cavalerie, les chevaux, pour gêner. Alors quand
ils étaient pas stupides.
Eh ben, quand ils marchaient pas dessus, ça marchait pas. Ils ont relié plusieurs avec du fil de fer. Comme ça, quand ils passaient entre, eh ben, ils les ramenaient quand même dans leurs pattes.
Right. So they joined several of those together with a metal band. So the horse would step on one of them and they'd all be joined together. Oh yeah, look, there's the remains of the band, the metal, the wire joining a line of them together. That is really bad.
Yeah.
Ça c'est très mauvais, très méchant.
Il y en a encore dans les bois. Hein.
Still in the woods, you have to be careful. That's when you go around these old forts that are abandoned. You find those and spikes.
Yeah.
Buried in the ground.
Oh, there, yeah. That's petrol.
There will be petrol.
Cailleboutier, c'est ça.
Ah, there's the kaibuti, the framework under your feet. Okay. And look at the Singer sewing machine over there.
A field forge.
Yeah, German.
Forge de campagne.
A German field forge.
Yeah, with a pedal to pump up the air blast.
Là, ici, là, vous avez la photo là. Picture.
In the photo there.
Picture.
That is very neat.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Où est-ce que vous avez trouvé ça?
C'est un monsieur qui nous a fait un don.
The German forge.
Alors ici, tout ce que vous avez de la poudre aussi.
Yeah, the ammunition.
What would there have been fuel for?
Essence.
For vehicles.
Il y avait de l'eau, comme ça, il y avait l'eau.
Il y avait aussi de la poudre.
And of course, French had more vehicles than almost any other country. France in 1940 was 25% mechanized. Well, I think it was only like 7 or 9% in German.
C'est comment mon grand-père était prisonnier? On a des bacs ici. Il est en train de tirer des stries dans un rizière. Quand il est redescendu, les Allemands qui l'attendaient. Il n'est pas ici. Parce que au printemps, il y avait des stries dimanche. Hein.
J'ai un livre du service historique français qui raconte qu'en 1938...
Voilà, champ de bataille.
Ooh. And it's been raining, so that's appropriate. But you can feel how much heavier it is to walk in wet mud. And you can only imagine how it would have been if it was really soaking wet and raining and you're weighing equipment, you're being shot at, had 1 million shells in a day. And yet in the middle of it all, one of the things that caused so many casualties are trench foot and wet feet.
Quand en hiver, avec le froid et l'eau, quand il reste une semaine, quand ils retirent les chaussures, il y en a certains, ils ont les pieds pourris. Ils ont les pieds d'orteils tout noirs, le pied noir, et ben on est obligé d'amputer.
Sometimes they took off their socks and their skin came off with the socks.
Vous savez, quand vous êtes dans l'eau, vous restez longtemps dans l'eau, vous avez la peau qui fripe et puis qui devient,
Your skin softens
devient
with the
plus
water.
fragile. si on peut
Sticking
dire.
to the socks, that's terrible.
Alors, eux, ils avaient les pieds trempés, ils s'enlevaient jamais les chaussures.
They never took their shoes off,
Donc,
and yeah, when they did, it was
Yeah.
catastrophe.
Now, I can't help but to notice there's a very large blue thing here that I don't.
Yeah, that's
That's a mortar?
Sir?
It is a trench mortar, isn't it? So you would put it on a tube and then it wouldn't go in a barrel. It would sit on the barrel and then it would be
it's a
fired.
narrow tube with a charge in the bottom,
Trench
and
artillery.
it throws it up in the air.
This was not technology that existed in 1914 when the war started. What?
Because in 1914, they had the what is the name? There's a special name. They had the bronze mortars. The mortier en bronze.
Ouais.
C'est long comme ça. C'est comme une coupe en
Ah, c'est,
bronze. They're the ancient 18th, 19th century
bombarde,
ones,
une
18th
bombarde,
century.
Yeah, this
They
was
used them in World War One
C'est une bombarde.
with a ball filled with gunpowder,
But
just
this-
like in the 18th century.
but this was new technology that was developed for World War One because of a need.
The trench mortars came in,
Yes.
yes, but the early Kuhhorn mortars were 200 years old, and they took them out of museums, and they still use them.
Just a shell that's buried top.
Yeah, they threw some shell.
It's pointing the wrong way. But it's a very nice reconstruction.
Like my bullets from my.
It's landed backwards. Wait.
Avec du vin?
So this is the bottom of a French shell.
Yes.
C'est
Ah, ouais,
français ou allemand?
Ah, ça doit être français. Ça.
155.
C'est un français, ça.
That's
Wait.
155, like the Bonds would find.
Yeah. What do you got here? What is that? Fuse?
Fuse.
C'est une fusée, oui. Une
Fusée. It's really hard to explain, sitting here on the mud, in the rain, what it would have been like to be here in the middle of an assault, in the middle of World War I, where you had so many enemies, not only the Germans, you had the rain, you had the shells, you had sometimes your own shells, you had the rats and the lice and the mud and the water, and it wasn't like you get to go home and change your feet and change your clothes and change your footwear. This was a different type of war that was absolutely miserable for the ones in the trenches that had to fight it. And I think at the outset of World War I, there was a large percentage of the officers in charge that was completely unprepared for the duration and the ferocity and the damage new weapons could inflict. And not only that, you then got stuck in snow and winter and weather and water and mud and insects and bugs and 1 million shells a day in one case in a location. And you had to stay here for years after years after years, literally grounding each other to death.
Well, the German trenches contained concrete bunkers to stay a long time. The Allied trenches were deliberately dug in the mud. The idea being that the soldiers couldn't stand that for long, and they would therefore rise up, go over the top, and attack the German trenches to push the Germans back. Of course, that didn't work, because
There's a lot of interesting ideas that officers of an, shall we say, past mindset tried to implement of morale and ideas and
Yeah.
motivation that were completely uncomparable to modern warfare.
yes. Another shocking example is that both sides had parachutes. the observers underneath a hydrogen-filled balloon hanging in a basket, they all had parachutes ready to use. The moment they saw an enemy fighter coming, either the French or the Germans, they would just jump. They would go over the side. Their parachute would automatically open. They didn't have to pull a ripcord. Now, in 1918, the Germans gave their airmen parachutes. The Allies refused to give their airmen parachutes. Why? Because some crazy general decided one morning that if you gave parachutes to your pilots and they saw, for example, Hermann Goering or Richthofen closing in on them, they would turn into a coward and jump over the side to save their skin. So those poor guys, when Richthofen did zoom in on them to kill them and set their plane made of wood and fabric and filled with petrol on fire, they had two choices. They jumped without a parachute, or they pulled out their pistol and put a bullet in their head, because this general had decided it was best that they die nobly like that instead of taking to their parachutes like cowards.
I thought a little insight in how life in the trenches actually was would be a good way to start before we continue to explore the rest of Verdun and its amazing forts and experimental bunkers built by the Germans. And that's something you don't see every day. I'm going to show you something I guarantee you have never seen from this area. And also, we're going to have to go underground because there's a lot of tunnels and forts and other supply stations, and you know how I love to hide under steel domes. But out here in these forests, there's explanations to why the German assault on Verdun did not go exactly as they had planned. Because suddenly, hundreds and hundreds of Frenchmen just keep emerging from the ground. And where did they come from? Back to World War I, because there's a lot more to this than you think, and a lot of it leads us straight up to World War II technology and today. Behind me is Wernher von Braun's first test stand. Down the road is Dietmar's nuclear reactor. Over there is the Maginot Line and all its amazing forts. I'm visiting them all and I'm bringing them to you. So I really appreciate you like, follow, and share what I'm doing, trying to document all these important historical locations. And if you feel like you want to watch more pictures or documents that I use for these, go to lostbattlefields.com. And if you feel like helping me out with my travels, because gasoline and travel and airfare is expensive, my PayPal is there, protectionserviceint.com. You are more than welcome, but you don't have to. I appreciate all your support and all your help, and I love seeing these locations, and I love bringing them to you.